Today, we have Mr. Afsar Zafri sir as a resource person on food security. Afsar Jafri sir has completed his higher education from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Sir is a food policy researcher currently working as Asia Regional Staff for Grain and a small international non-profit organization that works to support small farmers and social movements in their struggles for community-controlled and biodiversity-based food systems. He has been working on agriculture and trade issues for more than 2 decades and has written extensively on different aspects of these issues. He has worked with Dr. Vandana Shiva at Navdanya as well as coordinated India office for the focus on Global South and Asia think tanks in Bangkok. However, sir has a long association with the farmers group in the South Asia and provides them necessary technical support on issues of trade, IPRs, and food sovereignty. Now, without taking much time, I would like to invite Mr. Afsar Zafri sir to please come on main screen and enlighten us with his words of wisdom. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mohammad Sufyan Khanji, and thanks to the Integral University as well as the Department of Law for inviting me as the resource person at the Interdisciplinary Faculty Development Program to speak on the theme of India's policy and prospect to achieve sustainable development goals. And I've been given the topic to speak on is hunger eradication, a dream to achieve food security. I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir, you are completely audible. Please go.
Okay, great. Thank you. Uh, for me, in fact, both these objectives or goals under the SDGs in the context of India are simply dreams. And I would try to build up my case, highlighting the policies developed or being evolved in India, especially in the field of food, agriculture, and trade investment. To begin with, we need to first look at what the SDGs says about eradicating hunger, achieving food security. If you look at the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, which was adopted by UN member states in September 2015, it lists down 17 goals. And the goal 2 focuses on the topic of the day, end hunger promote sustainable agriculture, which is a key component of achieving sustainable development in all countries and especially developing and least developed countries. If you go down further in the goal 2 set, it sets the target which include ensuring access to food for all people, especially the poor and marginalized, improving nutrition, especially of adolescent girls, pregnant and lactating women, and older persons. It also says about doubling agriculture productivity of small scale farmers, ensuring sustainable food production system, maintaining genetic diversity of seeds and plants and animals, and use of genetic resources provided it ensures fair and equitable sharing of benefits. If you look at these targets, it's really look like a dream for me. And the kind of policies which are being developed not only in India but across the world, because there are so many members of these SDGs program, or there are many countries who have signed up to the SDGs. Most of them, almost every country, is simply going the other side. And I will try to look at some of the policies. I mean, I'm not saying every policies is is not addressing to these targets, but there are policies, and I'll first talk about that. So let's analyze one by one the different targets set by the SDG Goal 2 for hunger eradication and achieving food security, and what is India's policy direction to achieve these targets. We also need to analyze whether these comply with the mandate of SDG 2 or they just go opposite. Here is a quick look at each of the targets under SDG 2 and how it compares with existing policies. And I said I will try to look at the policy under food, agriculture, trade, and investment sector. So goal two, as I said, it's basically says end hunger, achieve food security, improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. And 2.1 of the goal two says by 2030, end hunger and ensure access by all people, in particular the poor and people in vulnerable situations, including infants, to save nutritious and sufficient food for all year round. And then the 2.2 of the goal 2 says by 2030 end all forms of malnutrition, including achieving by 2025 the internationally agreed targets on stunting and wasting in children under 5 years of age, and address the nutritional needs of adolescent girls, pregnant and lactating women, and older persons. I just want to tell you that I'm not going to go into too many figures, and not trying to show what is the global hunger index or what is the food security index and where India stand in those two indexes. I will simply try to go straight to the policies and how it fits into these targets or how it doesn't fit into these targets. So if you look at the several policies and programs which India has evolved in last 10 years, or maybe before SDG came into being, to eradicate hunger and ensure access to food to a substantial population of the country. And one of the topmost such policy is the Food Security Program, the National Food Security Program of 2013, which is basically evolved under the Act of NFSC Act of 2013. And it creates legal entitlements to existing governmental food and nutritional security programs. In fact, this act made right to food a human right, putting the onus on the state to guarantee basic food entitlements. The act also provides for coverage of up to 75% of the rural population and up to 50% of the urban population for receiving highly subsidized food grains under targeted public distribution system, which as per census 2011 comes to approximately about 80 to 82 crore of people in India out of 130 crore of people of population. And eligible households, which comprises Antyodaya Anna Yojana AAY households and priority households, are entitled to receive food grains at 1 rupee for coarse grain, 2 rupee for wheat, and 3 rupees for rice. While priority households are entitled to receive 5 kilograms per person per month, the Antyodaya Anna Yojana households, which constitute the poorest of the poor, are entitled to receive 35 kilograms of food grains per household per month. Similarly, there are other programs which are built into the National Food Security Program. For example, the Integrated Child Development Service, ICDS, which provides health and nutrition services to pregnant women and young children, and the midday meals scheme, which is aimed at providing free lunches and thereby improving the nutritional status and attendance of school children. The government of India, in fact, is also implementing. I mean, there are several other programs which try to, address the SDG goal 2. And another program is which India is implementing recently is called Mission Poshan, which is actually Prime Minister's overarching scheme for holistic nourishment, which was launched in 2018, and it's meant to improve nutrition among children, pregnant women, and lactating mothers. But if you compare the earlier public distribution system, which was existing before the 2013, it was a universal program. Everybody was entitled to go, and everybody has got a card. I mean, and they can easily access food at the PDS program. And it, in fact, helped in increasing calorie intake. But food became inaccessible for certain sections of the people when the PDS was turned into a targeted program. and only those people who have under the below poverty line or above poverty line, they can only access food. And that is the reason we have noticed that India has there are certain sections of the people where we can find hunger. And in fact, I will also talk about some of the court cases where these issues has been raised. So, but if these are very noble program, and I think it's really targeting hunger in a big way and trying to provide food security to people. But there are certain other mechanism which has been introduced, which are creating some kind of hurdle in implementing or providing or ensuring entitlement of food to the poorest of the poor. One of them is basically making Aadhaar authentication mandatory to availing PDS benefit. Excuse me. So this this particular issue, which is making Aadhaar authentication mandatory, it has excluded many beneficiaries because and because in government wants the Aadhaar to be linked to the PDS. And there was a case in the Supreme Court. If you look, I mean, since you all are from the law background, you might have heard about it or read about it. The Koili Devi versus Union of India case, where the Supreme Court has questioned the starvation death. The whole issue of starvation death was raised under this court case. But there are other issues also which are there. For example, when you have linked Aadhaar with PDS, there need to be a biometric authentication system, and each PDS shops have got a kind of a handheld mechanism where they need to put their thumb for authentication. And in several areas, there are reports coming in where the internet is not available, especially in remote areas. So that authentication doesn't work. Sometimes it works, sometimes. So it has not providing, it is creating kind of a hurdle in providing entitlement of food to the poorest. And similarly, if you look at, there are also frauds by ration shops where and it's called the quantity frauds, where because there are so many new schemes have come in within this PDS or food security program, where sometimes they are given some extra grains, but those information are not given to, or those food are not provided to the needy or to the people who are beneficiaries, and they are simply siphoned off by the ration shops owners. So this is another kind of a problem which are associated with. So, uh, so in fact, the Aadhaar and PDS link is basically is a failed attempt to safeguard the right of the person to food. Now, there is also a very important issue which is at the international level, which might compromise the food security program of India, and it is basically comes under the WTO, because if you remember the WTO in the WTO in Bali ministerial in 2013, there was a proposal moved by India called food, the food security proposal on public stock holding. And this proposal basically says that whatever food India purchase or India procure for the public distribution system, it doesn't constitute as a subsidy. It is not a subsidy. It is the food security program. It doesn't fall under the 10% de minimis which is given to the developing countries. But the developed country are saying that whatever India procure under the public distribution system is basically a subsidy given to the farmers, because India first declare a minimum support price, and based on that minimum support price, India procures that grain for the public distribution system, and that procurement happens on a fixed, it's called a fixed price. So this is, I mean, in the recently concluded MC12 in Geneva, we were expecting that there will be a permanent solution to this public distribution of to this public stock holding issue, but unfortunately it's still not. I mean, there is no permanent solution to the peace clause. Though India got peace clause in Bali, and even if India exceeds its subsidy and exceeds above 10%, India will not be taken to the dispute settlement body of the WTO by any country because India has the peace clause. But there are several other issues associated with it. There are so many conditionalities involved in implementing the peace clause. So this is something which is really going to compromise if the food security program of India, if we don't get a permanent solution to the public stock holding. Now there are other programs of some of the other government agencies which is also quite problematic. For example, there is a program, I mean, it's like Eat Right India movement. This is basically the Food Safety and Standard Authority of India initiative to transform the country's food system in order to ensure safe, healthy and sustainable food for all Indians. Though it's a very good movement, it says that the people of India should get safe food, healthy food. But at the same time, if you look at the same agency, the Food Security FSSAI, they have brought out certain regulations to basically allow GM food, genetically engineered food in India. For example, there was a notification by on FSS labeling and display draft regulation of April 2018, which basically makes it mandatory for all food products having total genetically engineered ingredients of 5% and more. So if we have any processed food which has got a GM ingredient in it which is above 5%, then that only that product will be labeled. Otherwise, it will be not labeled as GM, which is very important issue because you know uh, you know in India we are opposing GM for a long time, and we don't want genetically engineered ingredients in our food because there are several countries who has banned, European countries has banned GM foods. There are other countries also who doesn't allow, I mean, they allow only 1% of ingredient in any processed food. But fortunately this there was some opposition to this regulation, and then it was withdrawn. But then again the FSSAI brought out another notification in November 2021, which basically tried to bypass the genetic engineering approval committee, which is a committee or regulatory body to approve GM food in India. So actually the GAC is the regulatory body, but this notification tried to bypass GAC to create a role for itself in deciding about food products containing GM ingredients. This notification goes contrary to the GM rules 1989 by authorizing the FSSAI to approve the manufacture, store, distribute, sell, or import in the country any food or food ingredient derived from genetically modified organism. Because the GM rules of 1989 is the Bible in India for GM products. I mean, each GM food which are being allowed in India has to follow the GM rules of 1989. But this particular notification tried to bypass it. So this is basically done to allow any any food which has got GM ingredient, import of any food which has got GM ingredient in India. We have also seen in August 2021 that India has allowed basically the import of GM soya meat as feed for the poultry industry. We have also noticed that in India we have seen, for example, there is a CSC study of 2018, which have did a survey to find out what all product have got GM ingredient in it. Because for any product to be allowed, GM product to be allowed in India, it has to get permission from the GAC. But without any permission, several GM foods are being sold in India, and nobody is taking notice of that. So this is basically is compromising the food security of the country. And now there is another program which has been introduced, uh, to it's called food fortification or food enrichment, which is basically adding a kind of any kind of vitamins or minerals like iron, iodine, zinc, vitamin A and D to staple foods such as rice, milk, salt, to improve the nutritional content. But there are surveys which has happened in Jharkhand, in Chhattisgarh, which shows that the tribals and in fact, instead of the rice and wheat, now the government of India has come out a policy where they are providing in fact the fortified rice to the people in place of the PDS rice. And this fortified rice has got kernels, which are basically vitamin A, kernels mixed with the rice, and that is being supplied to the people. And that is basically, it's. I mean, a lot of reports have come in which shows that the people are not accepting it. They find that probably this is a plastic rice, so that is not being accepted. And there are other issues involved with the fortification. For example, those people who are anemic, or those who have got other kind of diseases or diabetic. I mean, these kind of extra additional vitamin or minerals will be a danger for their health. So those are another big concern which are being raised by several people related to the food fortification program. But there are certain international NGOs like Gain or Harvest Plus who are pushing these programs in India. Now, but it is not only the concerns about the what ingredients are there, or how it's impact the health of the people. But if you look at the other side of it, I mean, I have noticed, when if you some of you might have heard about it, there was a case in Delhi long back, around 2001 2000, where there was a dropsy epidemic had come in Delhi, where about 100 people have died because the edible oil was adulterated with argemone, or adulterated with mobile oil, or burned mobile oil. So at that time, India government has brought out a packaging order, and when the packaging order came in for edible oil, the loose oil was banned. And once the loose oil got banned, several ghanis which used to process uh, oil, edible oil, whether it's a mustard oil, a sesame oil, a sunflower oil, a safflower oil, those ghanis were closed down, and several hundred people, 1,000 people got unemployed because those ghanis done. Similarly, we have seen when the atta packaging oil come in, and atta started coming in, the wheat flour started coming into packaged form. So several, small chakkis which used to process, atta, those got closed down, and several people got, unemployed. So, but who got very benefited out of it? It is the big corporations like Conagra, Bunge, Cargill. These were the ones who really benefit, because if you go to the market today, you will find, Cargill edible oil available in the market. You will find Conagra selling edible oil. You will find Cargill and Conagra selling, packaged atta. So these are the ones who got benefit, but several people. So what about the food security of those people? So these kind of a program which get introduced will also impact, people's livelihood and food security. For example, I'll just talk about a program which has been introduced in Pakistan, where they are trying to ban loose oil. Just imagine if India also banned loose milk. So if India also implement a certain this kind of a program where the ban loose milk because it compromises the food safety standards of you know, then what would happen? All those small farmers who have got one or two or three cows or buffaloes, their food security will be compromised because whatever they earn from the milk, they try to ensure the food security of those families through by selling milk. So this is also very very important issue which we need to. So but we have noticed that these kind of programs are basically, you know, to push the small producers out of business and get all those big multinationals, like I said, Bunge, Cargill, Conagra, big ones, to come into the market and take over the market. Now, if coming into the second important aspect of the goal 2, which is 2.3, which says by 2030, double the agriculture productivity, income, and incomes of small scale food producers, in particular women, indigenous people, and family farmers, pastoralists, and fishers, including through secure and equal access to land, other productive resources, and knowledge, finance, services, markets, and opportunities for value addition and non-farm employment. Now, this is very, very important because it talks about doubling agriculture productivity and incomes of small scale food producers. We have noticed and we have seen in last couple of years, several thousand of farmers were protesting in Delhi only because their income are dwindling. It is going down. Now, this SDG program talks about doubling farmers' income, and probably because of this SDG, because India also signed up to this, India brought out a program in February 2016 where they set out a very ambitious target to double the income of farmers by 2022. But we really don't know what is the status of this this program, because if you look at the budget speech of 2022, it doesn't say anything about this program, doubling of farmers' income, because we are expecting that the government would say something about this, but so far we have not seen any report on any concrete report from the government to that whether whether government have claimed that okay, yeah, that we have managed to double the farmers' income. So, but there are other issues which are very, very important, and there are policies which has brought in, but later on it was withdrawn. For example, the Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Act of 2020, which was, brought in 2020. Similarly, we have also seen the Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement, the Price Assurance and Farm Services Act, which was brought in. It was again withdrawn. And I mean, the three farm bills which was brought in, the Contract Farming Act, but these were brought in by the government and later it was withdrawn. And these the main objective of the government to bring in these policies was to increase farmers' income. But if that was the objective, then why these policies were brought down? Why these policies were withdrawn? That is another big question. But if you look at the some of the trade policies, there are in fact if you look at the 2.b of the goal 2, it also links this goal 2 with the trade policy, trade liberalization. It says correct and prevent trade restrictions and distortions in food in world agriculture market, including through the parallel elimination of all forms of agriculture export subsidies and all export measures with equivalent effects in accordance with the mandate of Doha Development Round. Now, in this age of trade liberalization and this age of new free trade agreements, it really becomes very difficult to double agriculture productivity and income of small scale farmers. It's really a far fetched dream, and I will try to explain that, because if you look at the the WTO, when the WTO came in 2000, in 1995, it's almost 22 years, today. We have seen several impacts of WTO on Indian agriculture, Indian farmers, and 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 by signing on to the WTO, in fact, countries like India has essentially agreed to give up the independent trade policy as a tool for domestic development, food security and sovereignty, and industrialization, and accepted WTO as a super government. These member countries who are member of the WTO, they have laws which, if those laws are declared as trade barrier by the WTO, or that they were merely threatened with WTO action, these countries simply watered down their policy to meet the WTO requirements. So, in a way, these countries who are member of the WTO have lost their policy space. They don't have that policy space if their policy get challenged by the WTO or any develop. And we have seen it. And the public distribution, I mean, the public stockholding program is one of them. The food security program is one of them. Because despite last 12, 13 years of struggle in the WTO, India has not yet managed to achieve a permanent solution to the peace clause. And that itself shows that we don't have that kind of we cannot make WTO accept our demand that this food security program doesn't constitute a subsidy. So this is a kind of compromising our policy space. Now, there are other issues which are very much important, and which I would like to also link it with the food security and the WTO issues. Because in order to secure the food security, farmers in India or any developing country, they need to produce food, which is becoming difficult under the new trade regime, especially for small and marginal farmers. And what are the reasons? Because these farmers are not only farmers, they are also consumers, and they also need food to survive themselves. And one of the reason is that the WTO rules prevent developing countries from doing so by unfair rules on market access and subsidies. Because WTO allows market access. I mean, it so we have to, a country like India has to give market access or entry to the multinationals or to the government of other countries to come and sell their produce in India. And that is a big problem in WTO, or any which we call it trade liberalization, because we are allowing products of other countries to be sold in India at a very, very subsidized rate, and which basically com- compete with our own farmers' produce. So that is a big issue, and we have seen how it has impacted. And in cotton, it's very, very clear, especially in cotton in India. If there is question, I will try to. And I would also like to know, Mr. Sufyan, how much time I have, because I don't see any. Uh, can you please tell me how much time I would take for this presentation?
Sir, you can take 20 minutes more, because we are 11:34. It's now. We would be concluding this session at 12 o'clock.
Okay, great. Okay. So I will try to finish it in 15, 20 minutes, definitely.
Sure, sir. You take your time, please.
Okay, so now if you look at the subsidy and market access issue in WTO, some of the developed countries are giving their farmers huge subsidy. So just to tell you, for example, if you see individual farmer subsidy, I am not taking the umber box subsidy or blue box subsidy or green box subsidy or de minimis subsidy. If you look at the subsidy given to individual farmer, for example, in European Union, it's around 12,000, around 12 to 13,000 of US dollar. Similarly, in Canada, it's around 16 to 17,000 of US dollar. In Japan, it's around 14, 15,000 US dollar. And in US, it's almost 70,000 US dollar. So this is the individual subsidy farmers get in developed countries. Compared to that, in India, our farmer get hardly 2 to 300, $2 to $250 US subsidy. And now the dollar prices has gone up, so it is much less in terms of dollars. So similarly, in China, it's around 350 US dollar. In Brazil, it's around 500 US dollar. So this is the subsidy is big issue in WTO, and because of the subsidized food which comes in India, because I will just give you one example of cotton. I think it's very important for explaining it. For example, in India, you might have noticed a lot of cotton farmers in Vidarbha and Maharashtra, they have committed suicide. So why they committed suicide, especially in 2003, 4, 5, because at that time, the farmers in US were getting huge subsidy. There were around 22,000 cotton farmers in United States, which were getting around 4.7 billion of subsidy in cotton. And when they get the subsidy, their cotton produce get cheaper at the international market. So when they send the cotton to the international market goes down. So when the international market goes down, the Indian cotton producers, they were not in a position to send their cotton or sell their cotton in the international market because international prices were down. So they were not getting a good price. So, and they cannot sell to their own mills because the Indian mills, the textile mills, they are procuring it for the international market. So the Indian producers were in really in big distress at that time because the international market was down and the Indian textile mills were buying from international market and not buying from them. So they were not getting a very good price, or they are getting much less price compared to the international market. And because of that, a lot of farmers have committed suicide. But today the situation has a little bit changed because last year, yeah, we have seen the cotton prices in India have gone up because the cotton in China have not given a good result. So that may be one of the reason. But this is the subsidies is a big issue in WTO, and developing countries are demanding that subsidies in developed countries should be cut down, or should be eliminated. But it's so far they have not managed to achieve that. But in another way, if you look at the import, it also makes, once you start getting imported products in a country, then it makes the country very import dependent. We have seen how Sri Lanka is today facing. Today, Sri Lanka doesn't have foreign exchange. It's the foreign exchange has really dwindled down. It's hardly $1 or $1.5 billion foreign exchange they have, which cannot meet the requirements of the food import. So dependence on import is a very scary thing, and that is why for a country like India, we cannot be just dependent on food import. We have to produce our own food, and for producing our own food we have to have our own laws to protect those farmers. But because of the WTO, because of the free trade agreements rules, we are not in a position to protect them, like I explained in the case of public stock holding. Now, this is, but here I would also like to tell you about not only WTO, but India is also signing, negotiating a lot of free trade agreement, and free trade agreement is much more worse than WTO, because in WTO, when you cut down your tariff, you cut down your tariff from bound duty. They do not cut down your tariff from the applied duty. But in free trade agreement, you cut down your tariff from applied tariff, because there is no bound tariff in FTA. So in the case of FTA, sometimes it's total elimination of. For example, India signed an FTA with ASEAN, and there was several targets. By say 2010, you have to cut down this much of tariff. By 2016 or 18, you have to eliminate all tariff. So when you eliminate all tariff, your country becomes very susceptible to any kind of dumping, in the sense, the cheap produce from outside can be dumped in India, and there is no mechanism to check that in FTA. For example, in WTO there is a mechanism called special safeguard mechanism, where if there is excess of dumping, then you can, you use the SSM mechanism to protect your farmers, to protect your producers, but that kind of mechanism doesn't exist in FTA. So it is very, very, scary in free trade agreements. But another important issue which also coming up in the free trade agreement is that a lot of country with whom India is negotiating free trade agreement, they are demanding for, a liberalization of government procurement. So India procures so many things. For example, if you go to a government office in anywhere in India, you will find whatever is there, whether it's fan or it's AC or it's the food grade which procure for the public distribution system. It's constitute about 13% of Indian GDP. So it's a huge, huge market. And that is the reason countries like Canada or European Union or UK are demanding that India should liberalize procurement, government procurement. And once you liberalize government procurement, there will be an open tender, and any country from anywhere in the world can, give their tender for any kind of procurement which Indian government does. So if that gets implemented in the food sector, then just imagine what would happen. All those big companies, especially in the time when we are into high inflation, all these big companies can simply come into India, procure Indian food, and they will, once they procure Indian food, they will not follow the minimum support price mechanism, and they will not give MSP to the farmers. And we have seen it in 2005 2006, because when Indian government has allowed, procurement by the foreign agencies. And I remember I did a paper on that, because at that time the Australian wheat board, they came into India, they bought Indian wheat at 62 rupees or 60 rupees a kilo, and then they sold it, the same wheat, to 13 rupees a kilo to the Indian government for the public distribution system. Can you imagine? So this kind of things can happen if we allow government procurement. So these are the policies, these are the, trade policies which really going to have a serious impact on the food security of the country. But another important issue which is also there, like investment liberalization. Fortunately, we have not allowed investment in land so far, but investment liberalization is also a very much concern if we allow investment, foreign investment in land. And it's happening in other countries, where other countries are allowing. For example, recently we have seen, Israel has probably, I think they have gone and bought land somewhere. Similar big, several countries, for example, all the West Asian countries like Saudi Arabia and UAE, they are buying land in other countries in Africa. And if the same thing happen in India, just imagine. And then they will simply produce food here and supply it to their own country. They will not give it to the Indian government for public distribution system. So that will also compromise the food security system. But fortunately, we have so far not allowed it. But just for your information, there are several free trade agreements which are in the pipeline. We have just signed a free trade agreement with Australia and with the UAE, and there are other agreements which are in the pipeline. For example, with Canada, with Israel, with EU, with UK. So these are the things. Now I'll come to my last issue, which is very, very important. No, it's second last, and which is basically the 2.5 of the goal 2, which says that by 2020 maintain the genetic diversity of seeds, cultivated plants, and farmed and domesticated animals and their related wild species, including through soundly managed and diversified seed and plant banks at the national, regional, and international level, and promote access to and fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from utilization of genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge as internationally agreed. So if you look at these target, and if you look at the kind of policies we are bringing in, I mean, it's very much opposite. If you look at the GMOs, I mean, we have allowed BT cotton, and we have seen how the impact of BT cotton in India, because India used to have, just for because you guys are law students, India used to have several thousand varieties of cotton, local cotton, indigenous cotton, colored cotton, perennial cotton. But then once the BT cotton comes in 2012, today if you go to the market to buy any local variety of cotton seeds, you will not find it, because it's all been taken over by the GM. It's all been taken over by the BT cotton. So the Indian variety of cotton is not available today. Just imagine if we have, GM in rice or wheat or pulses or other important cereals, which really sustain the food security of the country. What would happen? They will be. So we have a new age of GMOs. We have a new kind of GMOs which are being introduced, which is called gene editing or CRISPR-Cas9, geoengineering, biofortification, synthetic biology. These are the new technologies which are coming in, and it's going to compromise Indian, food security system. And recently, you might have heard yesterday, the agriculture minister has said that we are going to, you are working on a gene-edited rice which will be commercialized, which will be available for farmers to sow by 2024. So if that is the case, and not only that, I mean, they are also trying to deregulate the laws. For example, I talked about the 1989 GMO rules. Now, the new regulations have come in, which will not you know which will not make it mandatory for the new GM products to follow those regulations. For example, recently India has allowed or deregulated the SDN1 and SDN2 gene edited products. Matlab, there are gene edited products where you make changes in the DNA without introducing any foreign DNA. For example, in the BT cotton, they have introduced a foreign DNA into it, which is called Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a bacteria. But there are gene-edited products where the foreign DNA, a foreign gene is not being introduced. So if you are developing a product without introducing a foreign gene, that product will not be regulated as per the 1989 GM rules. So if that is the case, then and because they are saying that it is similar, I mean, it's similar to the natural plants, so there is no need to regulate them. So just imagine how many GM products will come into the market even without we knowing that this what we are eating is a GM food. So it's very a big concern for people who don't want to consume the GM products, and those products will not be labeled either. So if you are buying, for example, if the GM rice comes in 2024, and we are go to the market and buy it, it will not say it's a GM, but you will be consuming the GM rice. So this is kind of new regulations which are coming in, which is going to be quite problematic. We have also, there are attempts to commercialize BT brinjal, there are attempts to commercialize GM mustard, but there are another serious thing which are also very very important, which are linked to the IPR, the trade related intellectual property rights or intellectual property rights issue. For example, the seed bill 2004 basically provides for patenting of seeds, the new amended seed bill 2004. But so far the good thing is that it's not yet been introduced in the parliament. It's still pending in the in the Rajya Sabha. Similarly, the Biodiversity Amendment Bill 2021, it encourages the conducive environment for collaborative research and investment, and to simplify the patent application process. These are very very, I don't know if you guys are also, I mean, you must be studying the IPR rules. So these are very very important issues which will compromise the seed security or food security of the people, because it allows the privatization of seeds, it allows the intellectual property rights on seeds, and it basically threatens contamination. So these are important issue which I think is very important. Now let's come to the last, and the last one I would like to touch upon is basically the 2.4, which says that by 2030 ensure sustainable food production system and implement resilient agriculture practices that increases productivity and production, that help maintain ecosystem, that strengthen capacity for adaptation to climate change, extreme weather, drought, flooding, and other disasters, and progressively improve land and soil quality. Now, if in Indian government has brought in several policies and allocated funds in the budget for promoting organic farming. It's a true, but at the same time, we are promoting, as I just talked about, promoting genetic engineering. We are promoting gene edited products, and we are also basically trying to implement a corporate driven program called climate smart agriculture. So climate smart agriculture, there is two kinds of resilient agriculture with this 2.5 talks about. One is 2.4 talks about, which is basically, one is the climate smart agriculture and the other one is agroecology. When the organic farming is implemented by the farmers, or if it's a farmers driven organic farming or agroecology program, then it's called agroecology. When it's a corporate driven agroecology program or organic farming program, it's called climate smart agriculture. We have also seen government of India has spent a lot of money. They have also promoting the zero budget natural farming. These are very good things, but we are very much concerned about the climate change which are happening. I mean, we have seen in Punjab this year, the because of the extreme heat, the 1 kilo of Indian wheat resulted in about 70 grams of wheat flour. And in fact, when I spoke to some of the farmers in Punjab, they said in every acre they have lost around 2 quintals of wheat because of the heat or heat waves. So it is very important that the government of India should promote the farmers-led agroecology program and not the corporate-led climate smart agriculture program. Because just to tell you why I'm calling it a corporate-led agriculture program, because CSA was took off from the Global Alliance of Climate Smart Agriculture, which was GSCSA in 2015. It was set up by the World Bank, the FAO, and the CGIAR. CGIAR basically it's a corporate driven agency, and we have seen all these companies. I mean, there are several companies who are very much involved in promoting CSA, that we call climate smart agriculture. For example, Yara, which is one of the big fertilizer company, international fertilizer company, Cargill, Tyson, they are all implementing CSA. They are not implementing agroecology. So this if my only concern is that India policies should promote organic farming or sustainable agriculture program which are led by the farmers and which are not led by the World Bank or the FAO, who has earlier introduced the Green Revolution program. Because they are basically under the CSA, they are trying to implement the Green Revolution program in the name of CSA. It's not actually because I have done a booklet on CSA, and I have seen how the GM is being introduced as climate smart agriculture. Genetically engineering seeds are being introduced as climate smart agriculture, which is not. I mean, if you talk to the farmers, if you talk to the organic farmer, agroecology farmer, there are several of them. In fact, one of them, one of the top one, is there in the MSP policy, MSP committee, which government have announced 2 days back or a few days back. He is a very top farmer who is promoting organic agriculture. He will also not suppose GM. He will not support GM. So my concern is that government of India should promote agroecology and not the climate smart agriculture. So because climate smart agriculture will not be a solution to for the food security program. Agroecology can be a solution for the food security program because it's a farmer's based, it's a farm based. You don't get input from outside. Everything can come from the farm. So these are the things which are very important when you look at the GA, the sustainable SDGs goal 2, because I have not tried to touch upon. There are several other issues which will be important to look at from the food security perspective. For example, the issue of digital agriculture, the e-commerce, the biodiesel program, the contract farming, the speculation and bidding in food stocks, or for example, investment in dairy sector. These are some of the issues which are very, very important and which will also need to look at from the food security perspective. But looking at after my 1 hour presentation, I would like to ask you that if you see these are the programs which Government of India is introducing, especially in the current scenario. And in this scenario, I don't think these would ensure food security and eradicate hunger, because if Government of India brings in GM or they introduces privatization of seeds, this will not led to ensuring food security. So I would like to conclude my presentation here. Thank you. And if there's any question, anything, you can always ask me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for such a wonderful and thorough presentation and discussing the issue. So there is a question from Mr. Salman. Uh, if you may allow, I should proceed with it.
Please go ahead.
Sir, question is, what is the impact of rising food prices on farmers and producers?
Rising food prices on farmers and producers. In fact, we have seen the inflation recently. Of course, as I said earlier in my presentation, the farmers or producers are also consumers. They are not just farmers and producers, because they also need to consume. And there are certain policies which has been introduced. For example, I skipped it, but for example, promoting cash crops. So those farmers who are producing sugar cane or for example, cotton or soya bean, these are all cash crop. They don't eat soya bean. You cannot survive just on soya bean or cotton, or so they need to buy something from the market for their own food. So it is and it is very important that these farmers who also grow non food, they should get a good return for their produce. And if they don't get the good return, their income goes down. And once their income goes down, these in kind of inflation really impact these farmers, because the food prices, increase of food prices is impacting the farmers and consumers equally, because farmers are also consumers. And especially those farmers who grow cash crops, and if they are not getting good MSP, they are not getting good return on their produce, then these food prices are really, really a big burden on increase in food prices, a big burden on the farmers.
Thank you, sir. So there is another question, the last question, and I should say that is a controversial question. So the question is, sir, do you think that the continuous free distribution of food grains by the government of India is leading towards the poverty?
Leading to the poverty.
Yes.
In fact, these programs are basically uh, to eradicate poverty, to eradicate hunger, and not to lead to the poverty, because it's not. I mean, it's not that only in India we are getting this. India is not the only country which is supplying free food to the people. If if you look at the WTO, because if you go to the Focus on the Global South website, I have written a book called on WTO, on free trade agreement and all that. And under the WTO, there are several subsidies program. You have blue box subsidy, you have green box subsidy, you have umber box subsidy. And if you look at the US subsidy, US give the maximum subsidy in the green box, around 120, maybe I'm wrong, but it's above $125 billion. And that $125 billion is just for food stamps, just for food stamps. And what are food stamps? The people who are hungry, who are homeless in USA they get food stamps, you know, and that food stamp they go and in cash at any shop or any, you know. In India, what we get first, we government procure the food, so the farmers get the minimum support price, they get at least the fair price. Then that food goes into the public distribution system, and then the people who are hungry, the people who don't have sufficient food, they get that food at a very subsidized price. But in USA they get free. At least here, the farmers pay 1 rupees, 2 rupees, 3 rupees. There, the farmers get, the people, not only farmers, the people in the US get free. And $125 billion of subsidy just for food stamp. So it is not leading to poverty. I mean, this is the requirement of the time. You can't let your own people die. You have to feed them.
Definitely,
I
sir.
mean, it's the government responsibility, and that is the reason it's we call it our welfare state. It is the responsibility of the welfare state to provide food, provide water, provide good environment.
Thank you, sir, for such a thorough discussion on this question. Uh, Now, I would like to conclude this session, and I, on behalf of Faculty of Law, Integral University, Lucknow, uh, thank thank you so much for your taking time from your busy schedule and discussing this crucial topic that is on food security. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, most well.